Hey friends, thanks for listening and for joining me on this journey. This is the 14th episode of the Ground Up podcast. And if I'm being honest, producing this show has been a lot more challenging than I expected. I'm solo producing, which means I book all of the guests, I set up the video cameras and the microphones, I keep track of the production while we're doing the live interview, I edit and I publish the podcast from my computer at home. So it is taking a lot of time out of an already very busy life. But I keep showing up because this mission is important to me. I started the podcast with a simple but ambitious question. Can Florida become the world's proof point for regenerative living? Can we demonstrate right here in our yards, in our gardens, and on our farms that we can create a more sustainable, more regenerative, and more vibrant future? I believe that we can. And if we are successful here in Florida, I believe that our example will ripple outwards, inspiring communities across the country and across the world. So that's why this podcast exists, to explore the complex and often underexplored themes that matter to this transformation. Topics like soil science, microbiology, plant health, plant nutrition, but also the economic incentives and frameworks that underline our landscaping and agricultural industries in the first place. I'll admit, I'm not an expert on any of these topics. I didn't go to school for any of this, and I have a lot to learn. I have a lot to learn also about being a host. Sometimes I don't find the right words, and I don't always find the right balance. It's difficult for me to guide these conversations, to ask the right questions, to keep the cadence of the conversation going, to keep it engaging and entertaining. So hopefully I get better by doing, and hopefully you guys will stick with me. Because this isn't just my journey, really, it's our journey. I think that together we can create a coalition of leaders, of landowners, and everyday Floridians who care and who want to transform our landscapes and our agricultural models for the better, for the benefit of future generations. So thank you for joining me and for tuning in, for helping me prove what's possible when we literally start from the ground up. Without further ado, I'll introduce my next guest. Buford Creech is co-founder of New Generation Ag. He is a certified crop advisor, providing agricultural clients with science-based recommendations on crop production models, nutrient management, and cultural management. I hope you guys enjoy this conversation, and thank you for joining me on the Ground Up podcast. Thank you very much for joining me on this podcast, Buford. Been looking forward to this talk very much.
I'm a little nervous, but I like you and love you and everything. You know how that works.
I saw you talking about a grain of sand.
Yeah, it has 100,000 to 300,000 bacteria living, or 10,000 to 100,000 bacteria living on it, something like that.
10,000 to 100,000 living organisms
on that sand.
On a grain of sand.
That's not damaged with sunlight or UV or whatever, or boiled, you know.
So I'm walking on a beach.
Probably on a beach it'd be less because of wave action and friction. But in a soil out here like at your tree farm or the grove, where that's been revitalized with organic matter and things aren't being killed, you're probably closer to the 100,000. For sure, if you go out here in an area of land, we call it an escape tree or escape area, probably more than that. Nobody knows. So since we don't know, and I don't know that we'll ever have the technology to know, I did a read one time, and I'm trying to find the source for you, that some scientists said that if 1,600 scientists, studied the biological life forms, it would take them 1,600 years. And by the time they got into the project, they would start off wrong because there's going to be genetic mutations that occur because of environmental shifts, and you will have new subspecies. So you never get to the end. So given that, you accept it. That's called faith. And you work within those frameworks, and you find the little niche that you want to work in. But at the end of the day, you want to remember three things about the world. We're stewards to take care of it. God gave us that. Number two, we have a duty to humanity to pass on security. And number three, it's just the right thing to do.
It boggles the mind to think that there are so many microorganisms out there. What about, just in the human body? I mean, we think of ourselves as being a living organism, but we're really comprised of billions, maybe trillions of microorganisms.
I did a summary, and you probably read it. I'll put it on LinkedIn and on Facebook. Of your body, the cells that make you and me, unless we've been radiated with plutonium or something, we're only 30% of those living cells is us. The rest of it is viruses and bacteria and other foreign worms or whatever, fungi. So we're only 30% us.
And then I saw in that same commentary that human beings only represent 1/100% of the biomass on Earth.
Sure.
Yeah.
We're a small fry.
It does put things into perspective.
Yeah, and we need them more than they need us. I'll tell you who said, Jacques Cousteau said, if all the small things in the world died, man would go away. If man died within 50 years, the small things would replenish the world.
Well, it's age-old wisdom, and I think it's good to start the conversation by putting that into perspective and thinking about, just how much life is out there and how important it is for it all to be healthy and in harmony in order for us to thrive. I want to start with something really basic, and I hope you can help me understand some of this science as we go through this conversation. But can you explain how photosynthesis works and why it's so fundamental to all life?
Photosynthesis is a process that works when conditions for life are favorable. It doesn't drive life. It provides fuel. It converts nuclear energy from the sun, photons, into essentially sugar. Glucose, the most important carbon source, everything in the world relies on it. And then that's converted to adenosine triphosphate, NADPH2, and other compounds that cells use for energy. But glucose is so much more important. It's like, if I'm not mistaken, I don't want to be misquoted, but I wrote an article and I can't remember it. I think it was like 600 times more energy than an ATP because it's just involved in so much. So photosynthesis allows plants to capture photon movement, essentially excite electrons, and they run a gradient in P system 1 and 2. And that ion gradient draws hydrogen. And so that hydrogen ion flux across that membrane is the energy driving ATPase, so ADP is phosphorylated ATP. It does that on NADP. So sun does that. And there's a lot of cofactors and metals involved in that process, a lot of membranes. And I know I read an article one time that if we could harness the power of photosynthesis and control it in a big way, we wouldn't need batteries, because we would already have the perfect energy storage unit, which would be sugar. I mean, something that's that many times more important than ATP is from a power plant source. Wouldn't that be wonderful if we could harness sugar, produce it, store it, and then use it?
Well, isn't that what farming is on some level?
Exactly.
So a lot of your work takes us into astronomically small spaces and dimensions. Do you think you could help us visualize the scale at which these life processes are occurring in the soil?
That's difficult, because to discuss something, you need to be able to visualize it. And we're talking particle sizes smaller than, in some instances, smaller than an nanometer. That's 1 times 10 to the minus 9 meter. We're getting into units that's 1 times 10 to the minus 12 or 15. Astronomically small. I just tell everybody, like my grandkids will say, how small are they? I said, imagine a BB sitting in the middle of the state of Florida.
Like a BB gun pellet
That's the relative size difference.
of a microorganism or cell?
Well, a bacteria, well, if there's 10,000 to 100,000 bacteria on a grain of sand, I mean, that pretty much describes it. That's why I like that example.
Right.
And viruses are 1,000 times smaller than that.
Mm-hmm.
The number one, as far as numbers of organisms on Earth, and viruses aren't technically alive because they must have another cell to reproduce. But let's call them, for the discussion, live. They're 1,000 times smaller than a bacteria.
You've spoken about the soil symphony. What does this mean to you?
A symphony defines order, harmony, like a wavelength. Imagine the conductor doing this. That's a symphony. Everything's working together. It's clicking. And there's no bolt in the gear. And it produces a mellow sound. And let me tell you how important that is. Water has a structure. It's a hexagonal structure. You don't see it because it's clear. But if you take that water and expose it to chaotic music, you disrupt that structure. And in some respects, the water then doesn't behave as the same solvent level than it is. And water that's cold, the structure reestablishes itself. That's why snowflakes come down and they're all hexagonal. They're formed from that. And when you heat water up and you throw it up in the air, it just turns into ice. You ever seen the people throw the hot water when it's minus 40 below and you just have this vapor that falls? It's not a snowflake. It's a chaotic structure of water. And a lot of folks use that harmonic structure of water to quote, people say they make it wetter. That's wrong. You can make water behave as a better solvent. A better media to carry stuff in, because most of our body is water.
So you describe the soil symphony as the vast interlocking associations between soil organisms, physical properties, chemical content, and biological diversity, sometimes referred to as the soil factory.
I didn't quote that. There was a professor in one of the research articles I read. I'm trying to think his name. I think it was Sylvie. And I've got those concept papers. And he said it's essentially a factory with assembly lines. And if something's missing, you shut the factory down. And part of the assembly line process is controlled by a trigger mechanism to start it up, a feedback mechanism to increase or decrease the speed, and then a shutdown mechanism. In other words, when you've saturated the ability to store sugar and you keep producing it, what do you do with it? I know in photosynthesis in the mesophyll cells, the Calvin-Benson cycle, when glucose is made, it'll move everywhere. Everything wants glucose. So it's hooked to a fructose in the form of sucrose. That's called a transport form of sugar, sucrose. It can be channeled, and this is moved into a storage site where maybe it's converted into starch or whatever. And when the plant recalls that sugar to use it for metabolic processes, it's an inventory system. And in a financial market, you've got LIFO and FIFO, last in, first out, or first in, last out. Depends on how you want to treat your inventory, and you've got to state that in your business plan. You just can't change it in the middle of the year. And plants operate on a first in, first out. So the factory doesn't get messed up.
So we're talking
synchrony. It's a synchronized flow. It's like a symphony.
And we're talking about the transportation and exchange of energy in the form of sugar, the form of glucose.
Converted to sucrose, transported to where it's going to be stored, and then it's deposited and maybe converted to starch. And then that energy molecule or storage is broken down back into glucose that goes into the glycolysis mechanism, or what we call it, the tricarboxylic acid cycle, the Krebs cycle, citric acid cycle, where it's broken in half to two pyruvates, and then in that cycle and with the electron transport mechanism, it yields about 36 ATPs, but some ATPs are used in the process, and I don't want to be quoted on this, but I think the net production is like 28 or 26. So one glucose will yield 26 net ATPs that are then used for energy, because that phosphate bond is where the energy is stored. Because when ATP is used as an energy source, that one of the phosphate bonds is broken and it becomes ADP. And when you break that bond, you have that free energy. And what we call in science Gibbs free energy. Energy is a really hard term for people to wrap their hand around, but the way I explain it, and it was explained to me, in the beginning of the Big Boom, all the energy that there was in the universe was released in a really small fraction of a second. No more energy is produced. All the atoms and material was produced in that small fraction of a second.
Planck time.
Singularity. Bam, it happened. And that's been expanding since then. And when I understood expanding universe theory, I said it started somewhere. And it's expanding. When's it going to stop? Well, airplanes fall when they run out of fuel. And when the free energy is expended, it'll collapse back on itself. And when you expend it, you don't use it up, because one of the basic laws in physics is you can't create or destroy matter, and energy is matter. You just change it. You can store it. And when everything collapses again, it's there, but now it's potential energy. It's not free. Something has to release it. And so the free energy that's available to do work is what we're always trying to economize.
In this soil factory, the energy fundamentally is coming from the process of photosynthesis, which is transforming
Absolutely.
nuclear energy into glucose, fructose, starches, and that can be stored. It can be exchanged, and it can be used to do work in the system. Energy. So how do we connect this to all of these microorganisms in the soil? Like, what is the relationship between the plants, the products of photosynthesis, and these microorganisms?
Okay, microorganisms in the soil below the ground don't get sunlight. They get indirect energy from the sun, because plants, when they're growing, they're exporting. Remember the teeter-totter? I wish we could show that picture. 25% of their substrates and more at different times are exported into the root zone. And the root zone of a plant is what we would call our digestive anatomy. Our body, when you eat a meal and you're digesting it, you get sleepy, because your body's moving resources to digest that food. Well, you can't get something out of nothing. That's a fact. So we get fuel captured in photosynthesis, converting it into carbon. Some of the fuel is exudated into the root zone to feed organisms. And then, like bacteria are transport organisms, they're transformation organisms. They store materials, and they build structures. They put organic particles together, building themselves a food reservoir. Fungi do that. Plants export biofilms off the roots to protect the root surface from the acidity of kicking hydrogen ions out, because that pH within a few millimeters of the root's always around 3, or more or less.
Which is very acidic.
Very acidic. But you get farther out there and you stick a probe in the soil, you may show your pH is 7. But if you've got a healthy root there, the pH within a few millimeters of that root's 3.
And that's because of the action of ammonium and hydrogen ions.
Ammonium and other sources to kick hydrogen out, exactly. It's a hydrogen ion flow. And that has to happen because plants don't chew rocks. They move through diffusion, osmosis, minerals, ions. A few molecules can move across the membrane. Urea can. Certain small glucose, for instance, will go across the membrane. Chlorine will zip right through. That's why we use chlorine as a disinfectant. But for the most part, there's mechanisms. It's called, the original hypothesis was called the chemiosmotic hypothesis, where plants kick ions in the soil out to compensate for ions coming in, so you don't build up a charge. It's called a potential. And so you have an ion flux across the membrane, you have a potential, and then you have the effects of all that, the net effects, which would be pH or conductivity. And that's, so plants, and then plants feed organisms selectively. They can actually direct which organisms can survive in their environment, in the root zone, to their advantage. Like in our gut. Our body does that.
So yeah, you were saying that around the root zone, you have the digestive system of the plant, and that's done in collaboration with a lot of the microorganisms that exist in that root zone.
Mm-hmm.
You said plants can't eat rocks, I think?
Yeah, they can't eat rocks, they eat ions.
They eat ions, but why would they want to eat rocks?
Can't.
They can't.
So that's why they kick the hydrogen out to create an acidity to dissolve stuff. And they kick enzymes out too. Plants produce citric acid. Kick it out. They produce, I forgot how many compounds. I wrote a little summary paper one time. I think there's like 30 or 40 known compounds they produce. Hormones, organic acids, citric acids, some other polymers. They kick them into the root zone. Now, that's not an accident. Why would you produce something and just give it away if you didn't benefit from it? And remember, in nature, it's called conservation of life. Plants don't out of luxury, produce stuff. It's produced for a reason. Storage, reproduction, and growth.
Okay, I still want to get back to this idea of plants and rocks. Are they trying to extract nutrition from the geological properties of the soil and the rocks?
From the minerals.
The minerals.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes I think that plants eat sunlight. Like they're just taking photons and creating carbohydrates through photosynthesis. But that's not exactly correct, right? Because that's not how they eat.
No.
They eat through their roots.
Absolutely. Well, they can take things through the stomata and through the cells, but that's not really the normal way it happens.
So through the roots, but they're essentially trying to ingest minerals.
We'll take in metals, calcium, all the metals. And then there's issues that plants face while they produce the mucilage, because aluminum is not an essential element for plants, although it is essential for life on Earth. It's not one of the 17 or 19 basic elements we say plants need, but every mineral on this world is needed. Every one of them. It's just that to grow a plant in this world, we may not can measure it in their tissue. It's like a house is built on a foundation. You ever go around a house and look at the foundation? It's under the ground, but it's there. And so plants are kind of cool. I mean, they have to be tougher than us because they can't get up and run for bears after them.
Yeah, they're not able to get away. But I'm really fascinated by this relationship between the microbes and the plants and the plant roots, because of this idea that the plants are trying to get the nutrients that they require out of the soil, but they can't do that without the assistance or the action of microbes.
You can, in a hydroponic situation, do it. It's very expensive, but you can.
Well, sure, that's an artificial human managed system, but in a natural system, plants in the soil, they're relying on the microbes in order to transport nutrients, to transform them into particle sizes that are available. And to do this, they are exchanging carbohydrates or sugars.
They need food.
The microbes need food.
Yep.
And they're getting that food from the plants.
That's why the microbe population right in the root zone could be 1,000 times or more higher than it is away from it.
They're going to where the food is.
Well, sure.
And so then the plants are actually directing the action of microbes and determining which microbes are going to be present in and around the root system by, I guess these are exudates.
Exudates, yes.
So they can actually release different types of exudates that appeal to different types of microbes.
Sure.
When you describe it that way, that the plants are intentionally producing very specific exudates in order to attract specific species of microorganisms so that those microorganisms can perform specific functions that the plant requires and desires in that point in time. That to me sounds like intelligence and communication.
It is. The internet was not invented by man. The biggest internet in the world are these hyphae that exist in the forest that travel for miles. And plants through quorum sensing can sense, and organisms can sense stress. They can sense opportunity. They can sense danger. There was a TED talk given by a lady in Oregon that said that different trees in an untouched environment can recognize their offspring and supply them nutrients during lean times to keep them alive. And they won't support other plants. To me, that's communication. And then in her talk, she said, when you step in virgin soil in these forests, your foot may be on 34 to 300 miles of hyphae.
So hyphae, those are fungi.
Yeah, that's their little threads.
The mycelia. Are there some fundamental differences between bacteria and fungi? Like, how should we think about that?
Well, fungi behave more like plants than bacteria, because fungi have hyphae-like roots. Bacteria don't have that. In bacteria, probably the basic food chain from the standpoint of below the ground and scavenging and recycling matter, that's their job. Fungi move stuff to the plant. They disrupt the old tissue. Like people think that orc and the termites are bad. Fungi destroy more wood than termites ever did. And besides, a termite's an insect that's a front-end loader, harvesting wood chips that it ingests to these anaerobes that live inside of it, like a cow. And these bacteria break down the wood, produce all kinds of byproducts. Like I read an article one time that 14% of the methane in the world is directly responsible from termites, flatulence. Now, you can laugh at that, but I read that article and I was trying to dig it out to make a point. We need to be taking some of these wood resources, growing termites, capturing the methane. That'd be cool. And then their bodies are protein. Now, I don't know how you feel about eating termites, but what is that lady's name? Jane Goodall showed these chimpanzees sticking wood into the termite mounds and pulling them out, eating the termites. Maybe they taste good. I don't know.
Yeah, well, there's everything that is alive is a form of food for something.
Yeah.
And it's these exchanges and cycles that are going on at the microscopic level in the soil, I think are really important to discuss, because until we really appreciate and understand the richness of this soil factory or soil symphony, the way you've described it, I don't think we can truly understand our responsibility to steward the soil and to manage and heal it. There's the protozoa, the bacteria, the fungi, the termites. You've talked about all of these a little bit. Earthworms. Incredibly complex and diverse, and the numbers are staggering, astronomical numbers.
You saw the amount of castings an earthworm can produce in a healthy soil.
50 tons per acre per year?
Yeah, and now some earthworms can burrow down as deep as 6 foot, but the typical general would be 10 to 20 tons. But in a really healthy ecosystem, it's upwards of 50, and according to what I read, and they can be as much as 100. That's a lot of castings, because earthworm castings, you're in the nursery plant business, it's a wonderful fertilizer. You could be almost a perfect fertilizer for your plants, but it'd be expensive fertilizer.
That's what Sam told me. It's the best fertilizer on earth ever known to man or nature is earthworm castings.
And it was made by earthworms harvesting biomass. They're the first green manure harvesters. And they make a little pile on the surface. And at night, when the UV doesn't cook them, they'll go grab a piece of stick and pull it down into their little tunnel. And it feeds fungi and, I guess, bacteria as a byproduct. And when the earthworm have these little burrows, tunnels, they secrete a mucus as they slide through the soil. Well, that mucus is a food source for bacteria. I don't know if it's fungi, but I know probably so. And then they come back later and they eat that mucus. And as they're eating it, they're secreting their waste. We call tests. The castings.
The castings. And that's what makes for great fertilizer.
Sure. And they're distributing it.
It
too.
improves soil structure. It chelates essential minerals and nutrients.
It forms the basis of soil humus.
And it allows microorganisms to thrive. You say 50 tons or even 10 to 20 tons per acre can be produced by healthy soil through the action of earthworms. Mm-hmm. It's staggering. And I reflect on our compost program in citrus. We're putting out, now we're up to 8 to 10 tons per acre of compost.
Are you seeing earthworms?
We're starting to see earthworms, yeah. But 10 tons of compost is truckloads and truckloads.
That's nothing, though, compared to the 2 million pounds of soil you have out there.
Yeah, I struggle with these scales of magnitude.
Okay, just in a 6-inch furrow slice in citrus, you're dealing with at least 2 foot of soil. Let's just talk 6 inches. If your organic matter is 4%, what's 4% of 2 million?
Please tell me.
80,000. Divide that by 2,000. It's 40.
Okay.
So you're putting 8 tons. People think they're going to build the organic matter up by adding it. You can, but it's a truckload. But to put a dent in it, you'd have to probably incorporate it too. I don't know. I mean, I love compost. Don't get me wrong. I love these guys. I know a lot of them, and I've got close friends that are in our prayer group. They're beautiful, and I like the idea. But to really make a dent in the soil, you're better to use it for water conservation to slowly build this ecosystem and keep adding it, because you're going to combust it. By just the process of adding organic matter without covering it up, you're accelerating combustion. It breaks down. So a good compost would be a continual program where you're not just throwing something out there, you're analyzing it.
The reason I brought up the compost is just to give a sense of scale to the action of earthworms. If earthworms can produce 50 tons of castings to an acre, that's far more beneficial than us applying 10 tons of compost to the acre.
Here's the caveat. You must have diverse life above the ground to support them. No life in the world is an island by itself. And when you disc the soil, you bust the little tunnels up, so you disrupt their activity. You have to. I mean, how do you farm without cutting a slice? So limited tillage, no-till I think is a misnomer, because when you plant the seed, you till it. But limited tillage is important to conserving soil carbon and not disrupting those channels. But people will go to that process to do it, and then I'm going to get ahead and I'm going to use some anhydrous. Well, anhydrous is a fumigant. It's not 82% nitrogen, but it kills stuff. So now you're going to kill earthworms. You're going to kill fungi. They need, because the fungi break down the matter, and then bacteria scarf up the nutrients. When you use a herbicide, fungi aren't plants, but they behave like plants. Fungicides, sometimes, my understanding, and maybe someone in the chemical industry can tell me, which I love these guys, we need chemicals. We got 350,000 of them. Obviously we need them. We got them. Which ones kill what? Sometimes we have collateral damage that we kind of assume is going on. We don't know what it is.
Oh, well, the collateral damage on herbicides and pesticides are unimaginable. I think we're starting to realize that now, but it hasn't been discussed enough, and it hasn't been revealed. We focus a lot just on perceptions of human safety, and we can say, okay, well, this chemical is safe to use because it's probably not going to cause neurological disorders or cancer, which is debatable.
Well, man's never invented a chemical.
Well, of course
He's
not.
just concentrated.
We're concentrating them, and it's a matter of dosage too. But we don't spend enough time talking about the toxicity of these chemicals to the soil, to all of the life organisms and
unintended consequences.
Yeah, because if the health of a plant fundamentally is dependent upon all of these organisms producing and their contribution, whether it's the bacteria, the fungi, the protozoa, the earthworms, the nematodes, all of these things that are happening as you've been describing, we start to introduce chemicals that destroy those organisms.
And ecosystems.
Then we destroy the ecosystem. We destroy the balance. It's the same problem with pharmaceuticals. They're very important, and we need to have them available strategically for the right use in the right dose. But if we try to treat everything with pharmaceuticals, we're going to create a huge toxicity in our environment, in our bodies. On the farm, it's the same thing, as you say. If you use it as your number one tool, and you're broadcasting it across the entire farm over and over again, you will destroy that soil symphony. That soil factory will cease to function. And when the soil factory is no longer functioning, your crop system will fail.
It's a ripple effect.
Yes, and at some point it becomes a cascading, process where it suddenly crashes, where you get to a tipping point.
Exactly. Tipping point, we don't know what that is. People think we're close to the tipping point. They don't know what it is. When we hit a tipping point, mankind will know, because it'll be pestilence like we've never seen.
I think we've hit tipping points already in certain ecosystems and agricultural systems, like, for example, citrus greening. That is the result, in my opinion, of a tipping point.
You can't blame it on any one thing. I think citrus greening has a lot of factors, but there is a root, fundamental, basic cause of it, and no one's ever looked back at that.
So what do you think the cause of citrus greening is? How do you describe that?
I think citrus greening is like what we're going through in this country, where anybody just walks across the border. Things were introduced that shouldn't have ever been introduced. And the environment was weakened, not by any one chemical or process. When we started destroying whole populations of organisms to control one or two bad bugs or whatever, we started down a road that's going to require a lot of recovery. It's like when you fight a war, and look what's going on now in Ukraine. You see those houses are in the banks in Israel. I mean, it's horrible. Everything's destroyed. You got to rebuild it. The cost of rebuilding is a whole lot cheap. Would be a whole. The cost of talking and not being so polarized would be a lot cheaper than having to do that, and have a lot less loss of life. And what we overlook in these situations is what has happened to the native organisms too. A lot of people died. Why do we do stuff like that? Why do we have 35,000 nuclear weapons? And I told you this the other day. This is where man's wisdom is lacking. There's enough nuclear power to fight a World War II every second for 4 hours. Why do we need that? Think about that. Because man has an overconsumptive idea of power. We shouldn't have that. And it's like talking bad about chemical companies. We shouldn't do that. We should partnership with them to find a better way.
Yes, and the utilization of chemicals, the overutilization of chemicals in agricultural systems has led to the degradation of our soils.
Absolutely.
And that has, in some cases, led to a tipping point where the soils have become so poor and so depleted that they are no longer able to sustain the basic life functions that the agricultural crops require, as in citrus greening. And then you add to that the invasion of bacterias and viruses from other parts of the world as a result of our globalization, which, you know, I don't know that we can control our borders even if we try, especially when you see just how many goods and peoples are moving across borders every day. And a bacteria, being as small as it is, very hard to catch.
We're all immigrants. At one point, we came from somewhere else.
Right.
We all did. So, I mean, I don't blame people for wanting to come here. But my comment is it needs to be regulated, just like when you use chemicals. The word regulation scares people because that talks about money and regulators and fines. No, there needs to be a collateral effort by everybody to communicate. If you have to use this compound, this chemical, what are the consequences that aren't good? Don't run away from it or hide it or sweep it under the rug. Address it.
Well, we have to discuss it, and I think that's why I wanted to talk to you to start out with, just how many microorganisms are active in the soil and why are all of these processes so inextricably linked to each other in this complex mystery inside the soil. Because if we don't know this, then we can't become aware of the costs and the consequences of using some.
Until we hit a tipping point, then it's obvious.
And then when we hit a tipping point, it seems like it's too late in some cases, or the cost to rebuild is so great, as you were saying. Now we've got a long ways to go to get back to a healthy soil. So citrus greening, if I'm understanding you correctly, is a result of depleted soils in conjunction with the introduction and arrival of this new bacteria.
Into a system that's weak.
The system is weak.
Like escape trees. I don't know if the concept was used where they're not showing symptoms. Why not? I mean, my backyard, I live right down the road from here, I've got a tree that was planted from a seed, an orange tree. It's old.
Well, it's in a healthy soil.
Friends of mine, McLean's, have a grapefruit tree up in North Florida, Alachua. Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lock off of Lake Harris. There are some escape trees in the swamp that are beautiful. So, but here's the problem with greening. Once you get to the tipping point and it's so widespread, you're in the middle of a forest fire trying to do the right thing on this little island. And you can, but it's going to take a while for the system to run through a cleansing. Then you can do it. So I think citrus will come back, and I think it'll be robust. Some things y'all are doing with the cups and everything will bring it back, but you're still going to have to fight it. But I think when we move forward with our new citrus industry, it'll have a different face. One thing we need to remember with any cropping system is we need diverse gene pool. Because if you have a limited gene pool and a disease comes along specific to that particular variety, you get wiped out.
You're toast.
And long years ago, there was a lot of different varieties out here. And my uncle, who passed away a few years ago, said, I never thought I'd live to see man destroy an industry of oranges. Because you got to try to kill them. And I asked him, I said, what do you think caused it? He said, we quit irrigating the whole field and we started killing stuff. Because I remember some orange groves with 90 trees that pick 800-900 boxes. We don't have that anywhere now.
Oh no, 90 trees to the acre, 900 boxes.
That's a lot of, I'm telling you, off the Lake of Popka over here, we had a grove right next to my house down here. Many old Tangelos. You ought to see the rainbirds. They're 25 foot up in the air, Those trees were beautiful with fruit. I have some old pictures of them. It's the tree's orange.
Yeah, those days are gone, long, long gone. And of trying to piece it all back together and figure out where we go from here, because we've been devastated as an industry, and we're trying to continue to grow citrus in Florida. We're trying to save the Florida grapefruit. So how would you do that? What are your thoughts on growing in a greening environment? What's the path?
What I would do, I would search with my heart's full effort to find a tree that's not impacted. And I would do every test on earth to find out, why is this tree surviving? And those are the traits you want. If you study sickness, you'll never find the cure until you go to the root of it. Remember the condition we had with the flu that was devastated a few years ago? They had to go back to where it started to find out what happened. And I think that's what we need to do with citrus. Something somewhere was a trigger mechanism, and nobody knows it because we studied how to grow in spite of the problem. I think we need to find out if there's some varieties out there that can grow within the problem, and then don't repeat what we did before that caused it. We, in our practices, were contributors. Okay, invasive species were contributors. Did it start with chemicals? Who knows? I think we need to find out what it was and not blame everybody. And try to do it right. And if these large corporations were involved in that, instead of looking at the government to put the money in, I mean, everybody needs to. I miss the citrus industry. I remember in high school, when I was in high school in Claremont, we didn't have air conditioning in a lot of the classes, sitting there and rolling the window, just listening, smelling those orange blossoms when the wind was blowing. I could go in my backyard and smell them, but that's a beautiful smell. You don't get it anymore. I mean, I remember orange blossom honey when it was everywhere. Some of the best honey in the world besides Tupelo. And I think it can be re-jump started, but the next time we jump start an industry, and this has nothing to do with just citrus, this is everything, we need to know what the collateral damage is, and so if we have to do things that aren't good, put the cure out there when you do it. And in our case with citrus, I think we need to study a lot harder. I mean, I don't know how many $100 million was kicked into it, but I have never seen a study where they took a few trees and analyzed everything.
Yeah, there's been a lot of money spent on research, and I don't think that we've gotten a lot of results yet. University of Florida is doing a lot of testing of varieties, but I think you're right. If you go look at these escape trees, whether it's the McLean tree or some of these trees that I could take you to in the Everglades or in various oak hammocks, you've seen them. I don't know what we would find, but I suspect that we would have to take into account the quality of the soil in which they're growing, because they're not in agricultural lands. They've escaped into natural lands.
Right.
They're
with other varieties growing with them.
There are oak trees. There's maple trees. There's pine trees. There's and then all the ground cover, and there's humus there. You can dig, and you can see that there is a very biologically active soil.
Mm-hmm.
So is it the genetics of the tree, or is it the forest effect?
Well, genetics is controlled by environmental pressure, because your genotype's what you can be, your phenotype's what you see, the expression. And I think we can breed something into a tree with the genetic potential, but remember, there are recessive traits there that can be triggered by environmental pressures, and I think that genetics will end up helping.
Yeah. So you're going to need both. You're going to need genetics, and then we're going to need to rebuild and repair the soil environment in which these trees are being grown.
And when we do something to the soil, collateral damage is there, fix it.
Right. So that's something I wanted to ask you about, because I was talking to Sam about this, and he was talking about this this saw-like pattern of working with the soil, because we are going to have to employ chemicals and practices that will have collateral damage on the soil. But what if we came in right afterwards with either a microbial tea, compost tea, worm tea, or some type of soil conditioner, so that we reinvigorate the soil micropopulations?
But here's the deal with that. So you don't get something for nothing. And the teeter-totter, here's a teeter-totter. If you're doing something bad that shifts you like this and the teeter-totter isn't working, and that, for instance, is an energy-related problem, to get it moving again, you got to correct the energy problem. And it will not be any less expensive to do that than the collateral damage you did. Because you can't create or destroy matter, so it's going to take the same expense to fix it based on what your savings were. So that's why I say that people say, well, I can't afford to mechanically control weeds. I think you can't afford to not do it, number one. And number two, you need to grow. You need to have a grove where it's full of diversity and you're harvesting the value through the trees.
Okay. I do agree with what you're saying. I think that we can mechanically control weeds. I was traveling in Peru and Colombia and other places where they grow citrus, and I've seen them do it. Now, their labor's a little bit cheaper, but they use weed eaters and hoes, and they go in there and they take care of the weeds. I think we can develop some sort of mower. We're clever. We can get some really good people to think about how to design the right type of machine.
Yeah, Clint and I talked about these little automatic lawnmowers. What if you had one with a buffer on it so you didn't scar the tree up? That could recognize the emitter and just have it with a solar hookup. They have lawnmowers like that now, a little solar hookup.
They just work autonomously.
24/7. As long as there's a charge, they're working.
Yeah.
You got a little bot out there doing your job for you.
You're right, and that's really what we need to do, because we can't use chemicals as the primary means to control weeds. Now, spot spraying, attacking particularly difficult situations strategically and tactically with chemicals, yes. And then you go in after that with a reinoculation or some sort of restorative treatment, whether it's compost or teas or
fuel of some kind, the organisms, the listeners, whatever.
Yeah, we can do that too. Okay, so that's part of the vision. And then what you said was you need to have a lot of biodiversity in your grove. So what does that look like?
Nobody really knows. They have an idea. Biodiversity would be a multitude of plants growing under that tree. I don't know the number. I don't think there is a magic number, and it'll be depend on the environment you're in. We're in what would be called as subtropics. So there's things we could grow here that could get out of hand real quick. So I think we need to learn to grow stuff that won't get out of hand real quick, number one, but has a value. There would be a mixture of monocots and dicots. And learn how to mechanically control 90% of it. And the other 10%, we just do what we have to do. And then you're treating less of the area with your remediation efforts, so it ends up not being expensive.
We're trying different ground covers under the drill right now. Actually, in the cups, I could take you out there and show you. It's a small trial. We're planting sunshine mimosa, swamp twin flower was Dichoristes humistrata, perennial peanut, some other low-growing ground covers, mostly natives like frog fruit. We figured that is going to create a soil environment that's going to prevent the emergence of undesirable weeds.
Have competition.
Have competition. You get some nitrogen fixation. You can bring in a lot of different microbial communities along with these different plant families. But I don't know how practical it is yet, and how we would implement that at scale. But we're looking into that, and then down the row middles, cover crops.
Yeah, and put a crop in there that you don't harvest. You turn back in the soil.
Yeah, sun hemp, daikon radishes,
Rotate it around.
buckwheat.
I mean, maybe a mixture of legumes and grasses.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're not going to spend any less money doing this because you're going to replace a lot of your herbicide expense with grass seeds, weed seeds, if you want to call them. I call them companion seeds. The word weed is bad. There are certain grasses out there, plants that aren't a weed. They're friends. We kill them because we don't like the way they look. That's crazy.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is we say we want diversity in the grove, and now we're talking about planting grasses and legumes and ground covers that we select, and yet when we have weeds growing in the grove, we feel like we have to go attack it with herbicides.
Or just mechanically zap their butt and then put something there. This is better.
Well, why not just work with what's there?
You can. Ben McLean III and I looked at some of this grass that was growing in one of their organic groves, and we had it analyzed, and it had the same nutritional value as Timothy, which is a good grass to feed animals.
There's a grass called Timothy?
Yeah, to feed horses and animals.
Cool.
And I was that guy asked me one time, how do you get legumes started? I said, well, I know a dairyman told me one time he plants oats, and he mows the oat stubble off after he harvests them, leaves the stubble there, and he'll plant the legumes right in the stubble. And he told me, he said, that way the soil's opened up, it's holding moisture, the wind doesn't blow everything away. If I get a heavy rain, it doesn't wash everything, doesn't gully it out, and the little bitty plants have a chance. And so there was a pecan orchard in North Carolina that Dr. Jacoby, my partner in the company, we worked with a guy that put it in, and we planted clover. We got with a seed company and planted 3 varieties of white clover.
In Georgia.
Yeah, and we put triticale because we didn't want to create a problem with a aggressive fertile seed. So we planted the triticale. It's beautiful. And when the triticale went to milk stage, we mowed it and then sprigged or planted the clover into stubble. And then when he irrigated the whole orchard, he didn't just do it under the trees. And I've got pictures of it. I think I've seen you some. That shows a beautiful clover field, beautiful, with pecan trees growing in it. And everyone looked at it, University of Georgia said, this is one of the best looking pecan orchards there is. We did that. I mean, I didn't have a magic. We just said, let's, instead of killing stuff, let's promote life. And then they would spot treat with Roundup. Spot treated.
Mm-hmm.
And after a couple of years, man, then somebody bought the farm from them, but I wish I could have followed that through. But it was beautiful. And we created some other problems because we created a beautiful cover of clover and voles. When they harvested the grain in the fields around this orchard, voles moved in, and they're rodents. They like to chew. They chewed the roots of some of these trees. So then we had to control them, which was not a problem. But we had to. You don't see them because they're under that canopy. And what was cool about it, when we got the clover growing, his water use was greatly truncated. His fertilizer use was dropped. I figured we were getting the net about 80 pounds of nitrogen per acre a year from the clover. And you could take your hand and stick it in the soil. Before you had to work to get a probe in the soil.
Mm-hmm.
It was loose. And he would go in there when the clover got real high, he would mow it high. And so you're always walking on a cushion of clover. The only downside was, and plus beneficial insects went crazy. They were loaded. And the voles, the rats, we kind of chuckled about it, but then we controlled them.
Yeah, I think that's the direction we have to head in, is more cover crops, more diversity in the grove, less chemical weed control, more mechanical weed control.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, continuing to try to heal the soil and rebuild that soil factory. And it's going to take time. We can put out a ton of compost, 10 tons of compost every year, but that's not the solution in and of itself. It's a way to kickstart, I think.
Well, the compost is like a prime in a pitcher pump. Right. It's the prime. Everything. There was a professor, I think it was Rutherford. I've got these papers. I don't mind sharing them with you. I did an extensive literature review years ago and found 2,000 papers and read the abstracts and isolated 37 papers that essentially said the same thing as a lot of the other ones, but they were basic papers that were older, that had references going way back. Following? And there's 37 of them. And one of the professors was saying the best way to conserve nutrients in the soil is put a fuel out when you put them out, because you're not just feeding the plant, you're feeding the soil. Made sense. And another one said the gating block mechanism for microbial growth and development is always sugar, fuel. Makes sense. It's common sense. We should have known that. If you've got a contaminant in the soil and you want to get rid of it, you have to grow the organisms there that can consume it. First of all, you have to know the contaminant, the level of contamination, what organisms might you have to grow to break down the diesel or whatever it happens to be, and you have to feed them. And then they'll break it down. And how you feed them is you prime them. You push their numbers high, then you pull their food source away. Pew! Degrade everything available. And so I learned that from a guy who was cleaning up when Russia left Czechoslovakia. They dumped, my understanding, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of gallons of fuel right on the ground. And there was some soil so polluted you could literally burn it, And they just wanted to determine how to burn it out. And so working for a molasses company at the time, I was an international director. I met the guy, and he worked for the EPA, and he was on that project. And he said, we need to prime the system. He read the same paper as I did. And he said, we can use molasses to do, but what's a good long-term food source that's inexpensive? I said, well, certain cheap dog foods, that's what they used, a cheap dog food.
To feed the microorganisms
that would break down the hydrocarbons, because dog food's got fat in it, oils. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't want to necessarily do that.
So they had to introduce the specific microbes that would eat the hydrocarbons?
And feed them.
Yeah. And how did they know which ones would do that job?
Well, they spent money and found it out. They had to. This was a dire... And actually, after a few months, they couldn't detect any more contaminant.
Right. Well, the potential of bioremediation with microbiology is tremendous. To break down hydrocarbons, to break down heavy metals, other forms of chemical toxicity in the soil, even plastics. And I'm excited that the world is moving into this new frontier of understanding, just the miraculous potential of these microorganisms and these processes.
So plastics never go away.
Well, you can turn them back into carbon.
You can burn them. But can you imagine the process of gathering all these plastics that we've got everywhere and burning it?
Well, I was speaking to a young man who's developing a process to use the microorganisms that are found in mealworms to break down the lignins and cellulose polymers inside of plastics. And
but can you control that organism in nature?
Well, no, he's doing it in bioreactors and in a controlled environment. But his thought is to actually try to isolate and identify the enzyme that is being used by these microbes to do the work, and then to
produce the enzyme.
So that you could then you could take it to the Great Pacific Garbage Patch and dump it on that.
And there's 5 of those in the world. That's just one of them.
Yeah.
There's one over in Asia that makes that one look small. It's horrible. There's some beaches over in Asia that, it's a beach of bottles.
Yeah. Well, we got to face the hard, brutal facts here. Our soils are depleted. Our oceans are full of plastic. Our bodies are full of toxins and chemicals. We need to be thinking about remediation and bioremediation and restoring health to these systems. And that's the new evolving science. It's their new evolving industries, technologies, and markets. That's why I talk to entrepreneurs and I get really excited, because I know that people who are working on these problems today and who are able to find solutions are going to be very successful, because the world has a need, and where there is a need, there is a market.
It's amazing what man does wherever he goes. My grandson graduated from high school this year, one of my grandsons, and he's going to work in space science. And he says, Grandpa, this is cool. I said, what are you going to do, Richie? He said there's a satellite the Japanese developed that can identify this crap in space. There's millions of pieces of particle out there going around the Earth. And the problem is, people say, well, an alien might come to Earth. They're going to come through a minefield when they do.
Are you talking about space trash, like
Yeah.
bits and pieces of satellites?
Oh, million. And they're traveling at 17,000 miles an hour. So if you're coming in at 30,000 miles an hour, you might as well get shot with birdshot because you're going to just mess you up. And so he said they're developing these big net structures that'll go through and grab this stuff. And I said, well, what do they do with it? He said they slow it down and it burns. Oh, so they use the friction coming into the atmosphere to, what we say, burn this stuff. Some of it will burn, some won't. Point Nemo is where they try to crash all this stuff.
Yeah, so we've also polluted space. I forgot to
That's
mention
a bad
that.
one because, man, I was thinking about, well, some alien coming here to visit us in peace, think we're shooting at them.
Yeah, either that or we're just really disgusting and we leave our trash lying around everywhere.
Look at the moon or Mars. Have you seen those pictures on Mars and stuff?
No, I'm not sure which ones you're referring to.
The junk they run into and see all the time. That we from previous.
From previous missions?
Oh yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Man has the out of sight, out of mind mentality, and I used to tell that to people that your garbage goes by the road. Here, where we live down the road, it's Thursdays. They pick it up. Maybe Fridays. Sometimes, who knows? When they pick it up, it's not gone. It just moved somewhere else. Out of sight, out of mind. And when people come out here in the world and spray stuff in the soil and it kills the weed, oh, it's gone. It just started working. Now we have collateral damage we don't even know about.
Well, our relationship to waste is fundamentally flawed, and I think it's the root cause of a lot of these problems we've been talking about. Like you say, out of sight, out of mind. If I can just, have somebody take the trash away, it's like it was never there. Flush the toilet, problem solved. But if we're not cycling things back into the system, then we're depriving other organisms of their food source.
Gibbs free energy efficiency will get us. You've only got so much stuff in this world. It's like if we ever mined out all the hydrocarbon, which I doubt we would in a couple thousand years, what are we going to do for real fuel? I mean, solar's cool, but you don't have a battery to store it. They do have a battery. That little battery that's running that Sputnik since 1977 still works, but my understanding is those things would cost about $30,000 a piece. So there goes them. I mean, so you buy a battery that'll last 60 years. I mean, who's going to spend $30,000?
Well, they might improve the battery technology, but yeah, we can't just extract, deplete resources and then kick the waste products downstream. I think the trick is to figure out a way to recycle everything and back into the system and to create harmony by recognizing that one man's waste is another man's treasure.
Well, we're looking at the best battery reserve right under our nose and we ignore it. Photosynthesis, we started to talk on it. Sugar. There's a lot of energy in sugar. It's stored energy. You'd have to convert it from chemical energy back into electric energy. It's not hard to do. You have to learn how to burn it and generate heat, whatever, make it run a turbine, make electricity. And the photosynthesis is working 24/7 everywhere in the oceans.
Yeah, we're going to find solutions. There's actually a lot of hope. I'm fundamentally very optimistic about the future of humanity despite these very real problems that we spend a lot of time talking about, because once we understand the problem and we face the problem, then we can find solutions to that problem.
Absolutely.
Human ingenuity and innovation is great, but nature is even greater. And you see within the processes of nature, all of the solutions to our problems are encoded there. There are some clues to how to get out of this mess by looking at healthy soil, by looking at a healthy ecosystem and understanding the dynamics of balance and equilibrium and exchange. Everything is cycling and everything is in service of something else.
Well, we're talking about AI being scary. It is, but on the same token, AI now gives us the ability to ask the right question to get the answer.
Sure, it's a powerful tool.
You've got to ask the right question, and that's what I'm afraid we're losing. People are losing the ability to ask the right question because they're relying on the tool too much. And that's scary.
Well, the question I have is, how can we better understand nature, and how can we apply this knowledge to solving some of our challenges today?
Take a lot of the brilliant minds we have and focus them in a little different direction. I took physical chemistry, organic chemistry, biochemistry. I took so many chemistry classes, physiology, botany. I took all these classes. I went to school because it drives me to learn. I cannot not learn. I just, my whole life. Here I am, 3/4 of a century old, still reading and still doing a productive mind. I would send out every day hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of emails. You know that. And I get feedback. And everyone said, "Why do you do that?" I said, "I don't know. That's my gift, I guess. Curiosity."
Curiosity is so powerful. It is so important to nurture curiosity in this world.
What's your gift?
Well, I would say I'm very curious. I'm very, very curious, and I think in terms of concepts. And I have a tendency to look for connections and to synthesize.
It's the X's.
Yeah.
You need to, here, you've got this. We ought to have a session on that sometime. I was real leery to give that out because the professors that did this, they didn't take ownership to it. They just realized there were basic concepts. And if you give the concepts to everybody, it's just a word, isn't it? But you don't draw the correlation to it being a concept until you understand what it says. And that's kind of cool. And that's not me. That's not mine. I should share it. I know. And here's the fundamental categories of it right there. Right there, there's 5 of them.
Cell theory. All living things are composed of cells, and all cells arise from pre-existing cells. Gene theory. Characteristics are inherited through the transmission of genes, which are located on chromosomes and made of DNA. Homeostasis. Living things maintain a stable internal environment despite external changes. Evolution. Changes in populations of organisms over time, often driven by natural selection, leading to adaptation. Biochemistry. Movement or energy capture and use. Yeah, I love this. These are first principles, basic concepts pertaining to the organization of living systems.
Yes. Now, there's some concepts that won't apply to non-living systems, but there are concepts in here that apply to both. Gravity is a good example.
Yeah. Well, understanding living systems is my passion. I want to go back to the citrus greening discussion for just one more question, because I've been really curious to ask you this. I've seen some trials done recently with orange jasmine extract, Maria paniculata, and they are remarkable. It's very early days. Obviously we don't have final conclusions, but I can observe that the trees that have been treated with this extract are very vigorous. They have much fuller, denser canopies, and the leaf expansion is remarkable as compared to trees that were treated with a number of other treatments, including a lot of antibiotics, doxycycline, oxytetracycline, penicillin, and some other extracts. But the orange jasmine is fascinating to me because we know that orange jasmine is the favored host plant of the Asiatic psyllid.
And it's not affected by it. So remember we said the right question? You need to ask the right question. You go to where there's not a problem, where there should be, and find out why. And that's your solution.
Okay, so orange jasmine is not affected by the class bacteria
And here's
of citrus
the question.
greening.
Why?
Why? Why do you think?
Biochemically, why? Because there's enzymes in there to prevent it from happening.
Enzymes, just basic plant compounds?
Maybe there's a recognition factor that, hey, this is a threat, let's deal with it.
Induce systemic response?
Yep.
So,
now that's something you can actually breed into a species, but you have to put your finger on it. Recombinant DNA is dangerous.
but why wouldn't you just do the extract?
That's what I'm saying. Maybe you should be growing citrus jasmine.
Yeah, it's illegal in Florida. The DEP said nobody can grow orange jasmine, which is funny to me.
You know why? Because it's a host for...
It's a host for psyllids. Yeah. But it, could it have been right under our nose? I mean, people used to say, and I don't know if it's true or not, they used to say that that's how citrus greening came to Florida in the first place. Somebody was importing an orange jasmine plant from China for ornamental use, right? Okay. Maybe they shouldn't have done that, but if they did, that could have been a vector for
That was the border thing we talked about.
The border thing, yeah. So the very plant that brought in the disease in the first place could be maybe a part of the solution if we learn to understand what compounds are causing this plant to not express greening symptoms despite being the favored host plant for the psyllid.
There's another professor, and I won't say his name, but he invented the strobilurins, and his name is part of that name. And he was looking for a cure for the Dutch elm disease. And he found that you don't need to kill the organism, you just need to keep it from growing or reproducing. And he brought a material into the States that effectively shut down the Dutch elm disease. But it was a non-indigenous species. And he almost got in trouble for that. But he didn't get in trouble because it's important that they did that. Like the American chestnut. Wouldn't that be wonderful if somebody developed a compound? Because that used to be 40% of our hardwoods.
Yeah, we've lost a lot of trees to disease.
Yeah, why was that?
So do you think you could make an orange jasmine extract? How would you apply it? Should it be a foliar? Should it be a drench?
You've got to get it into the plant. That's like the citrus, and that's also going to be the solution. The psyllid is a nurse with a hypodermic syringe. She's feeding in the phloem, so that's where she puts the deal. So you've got to maybe use the psyllid as the carrier. I don't know.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. So maybe just plant orange jasmine around your grove. The psyllid would maybe naturally uptake the enzymes and transfer them to the citrus tree?
That would be the right kind of thinking, but you'd have to make sure you could do that. I mean, I don't know why you couldn't.
I'm curious about this. I want to learn. I want to trial and
like the Anopheles mosquito that causes malaria.
Mm-hmm.
People with sickle cell trait don't get malaria, but sickle cell anemia kill you.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened to cause that? Well, people living in an area with that mosquito and that disease that had the sickle cell trait didn't die, and they kept populating. So the sickle cell trait protected them. But the full-blown sickle cell will kill you. So the whole answer with that was the trait. They needed it. What is the trait? What is the trigger mechanism that stops it from being a problem in the jasmine? And maybe you isolate that mechanism. And maybe you can inject that into the tree somehow, or maybe you could foliar. I don't know. Getting into the xylem is difficult because you've got companion cells to protect it. It's like you punch a hole in a straw, you don't suck tea through it. You ever have a straw that was broke?
Mm-hmm.
Except suck air. So you'd have to get it in there, and I don't know how. You'd have to, maybe you could find some insect that would inject it for you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why people laugh at that, man. Why would they?
I think we have to be open-minded. We need to be creative, curious, and humble if we're going to solve problems like citrus greening.
Maybe we don't want to admit there's an insect that could help us fix the problem. I don't know.
Why wouldn't we embrace the fact that an insect could be part of the solution? We just spent all this time talking about the importance of microorganisms and fungi and bacteria and protozoa, termites, earthworms. We can talk about pollinators. Haven't talked about pollinators. All of these things are living organisms. Some of them are insects. And they are so essential to the stability of life. So why wouldn't we look for solutions there? And that's why I'm really curious about the new science of ecology, microbiology.
Do we want solutions in the industries, or do we want Band-Aids?
Yeah, we want solutions. We have to get beyond.
Do you want a set of tires that never wear out? No,
Right.
the people that make them don't want you to have one.
Yeah.
Think about it. They really don't. I mean, planned obsolescence drives marketing.
Yeah, well, that's to me is there's a flaw in thinking when we have this scarcity mindset that we need to protect our profits by ensuring that our products are going to be obsolete or going to be reordered and reused. There's a lot of wealth that can be generated by creating sustaining systems of abundance. It seems very natural to me to think that way, that if we can create a self-perpetuating, self-sustaining ecology, then that is going to generate abundant wealth, and we don't have to tie our economic fortunes to a product that is going to deplete or is going to become obsolete.
That concept defines the difference between wisdom and greed.
Sure.
People that are greedy will use knowledge simply for making profit. People with wisdom will understand that. But if they've got ethics and moral values and put people first, they would never let that happen. In other words, it's like Einstein. Just because we can split the atom doesn't mean we should have, because we don't have the wisdom to control it. And was he right?
How do we let our ethics and our morality guide our actions, not just in agriculture, but in economics and in life in general? And when you discuss soil and you discuss what's going on at the microscopic level, you're talking about something that is divinely inspired.
Sure.
So how does that drive your faith and shape your understanding of science?
I know enough about science in my 50 years of looking at it all the time, I haven't ever stopped, that what we see in the world is not an accident. It's not some manifestation of some spontaneous bacteria that grew in a puddle, because it just doesn't add up. And a story I read a long time ago, I told my grandkids this: well, Grandpa, does evolution exist? It certainly does, but we are not here because of evolution. We've changed because of the environmental pressures on us. But it's like, I said, let me tell you the story. You tell me if you believe it or not. You know what a Swiss watch is? Yes, a valuable watch. I said, there was one that was found on a beach over in Europe. And some Swiss guy said, where'd it come from? And some guy theorized that because of volcanic activity a billion years ago, all these particles were blown into the atmosphere, and some of them look like screws and springs, and some of the quartz look like glass clear, and some of the gears, just were accidentally made by wave action on these bits of metal that were blown into the ocean. And after another billion years of wave action, one day a Swiss watch washed up on the beach. Grandpa, that's crazy. I said, there you go. People that can believe in evolution starting it all rather than creation, they have more faith than I do.
Yeah, the Goldilocks zone, this idea that everything is so finely tuned to at an incredible scale of probability for life to exist. And all of these factors have to be just right, just so. It seems like a folly to me to attribute that to random chance. And
People without wisdom think that way.
Yeah, and maybe also a lot of pride. I think it takes a certain humility to, to accept the mystery and to believe in a greater power that is animating all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, you have to consider that your weakness is your true strength. My case with my mental deal, the way I might think and everything, when you overcome your weakness, you become stronger. But if you don't think you have a weakness, how can you become stronger?
Yeah, that's like what you're saying about criticism earlier. And stress, challenges, even and we know in plant life, it takes stress to build strength. In plants, it takes challenges in life to build skills, and it takes overcoming adversity to really grow. That's why I like to try to be grateful for the hardest parts. Be grateful when things get difficult. Be grateful for citrus greening. It's going to make us better farmers.
Sure.
And but I think, yeah, it's hard to observe nature and work with nature and not be in awe, not to fall into this incredible awe of what we are faced with. And
The world was a gift to us. We were told to take care of it. It's a gift that you were born out of one of 400,000 or whatever. Think about them apples. So it wasn't an accident. If people think, well, I was just an accident of birth, you might have been, but I wasn't. I know. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, and with that gift comes a certain responsibility.
Yes. That's where people that realize that early they become wise. Because you don't know that. You have to be told that by our Maker. Because all wisdom comes from Him. Man has no wisdom. Matter of fact, several times in the Bible, our wisdom is folly to God.
I think we have to cultivate, like you say, wisdom and stewardship and faith in order to have a more gentle and peaceful path to success.
Love everybody.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
helps.
You shouldn't hate. If you're in a room with somebody you don't want to be in, the best thing you can do is go home, go fishing. Be nice to them.
If there's one truth you want the next generation of land stewards to carry forward, what would it be?
Study the errors that we made. Look at the things that have been done that caused problems. Because without understanding that, history will repeat itself. Like Eisenhower told the troops when they liberated the concentration camps, take pictures. We can't let the world forget this. Because if we do, it'll be repeated. And that's the big mystery in the world. We can't keep repeating the bad mistakes of the past. So I tell young people, study what didn't work. Because when you study what didn't work, you're going to gain a lot of knowledge. And then if you pray for it, you'll get wisdom and you'll make a living on that.
There's a lot of beauty in what you're sharing. I want to thank you for sharing that wisdom with me and with our audience and for being here, Buford. It's great to know you, and I really enjoy these conversations.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Maybe we'll do some more on some different topics or dig deeper into some of the topics.